What would you do if the person being bullied wasn't the one you were actually hurting? This is the story of a girl who never fought back and the twin sister she sent in her place, not to survive, but to finish what she couldn't. You'll think you know who the villain is. You'll think you know who's telling the truth, but by the end, one final detail will flip everything you thought you understood, because the most terrifying kind of revenge doesn't scream. It smiles and waits. So stay close, watch carefully, and don't blink. Because when the truth finally comes out, you'll realize it was right in front of you the entire time, inside one cracked locket, held by the wrong girl. The girl who never fought back. Nora Wynn was the kind of girl you forgot while looking right at her. She moved like a shadow in the crowded halls of Wheatley High, quiet, careful, always shrinking a little smaller when someone looked her way. Her backpack hung off one shoulder like a weight she couldn't shake, and her head was always tilted down as if her eyes didn't deserve to meet anyone else's. The lockers clanged, laughter echoed, phone cameras flashed. Nora slipped through it all like wind through a cracked window, not invisible, just ignored. Every day she wore the same thing, an oversized beige cardigan, frayed at the sleeves, and a pair of scuffed sneakers. But it wasn't the clothes people whispered about. It was the locket, a black heart-shaped locket, cracked straight down the middle. It hung low on her chest. The chain faded, the clasp barely holding. No one had ever seen what was inside. Some said it held a picture of her dead parents. Others claimed it was empty, like her. But Nora touched it constantly, almost like a reflex, thumb against metal, like she was checking if it was still there. If she was still there, the cruelest girls at school, Addison Reed and her little pack of fame chasers, had a name for her: the Ghost. Nora heard them say it. More than once. Sometimes they said it loud enough for her to hear on purpose. Sometimes they filmed it. She never said anything back, never fought, never ran, because that's the thing about ghosts. They don't scream, they just drift. Her locker was dented from a kicked backpack. Her textbooks were covered in graffiti, some obscene, some just cruel. There was a video going around of someone tripping her in the cafeteria, but it was edited with clown music and slow motion. Nearly 1,000 likes in 2 hours. Nora didn't watch it. At home, things weren't any brighter. She lived at the edge of town in a pale green house with chipped paint and vines creeping up the porch rails. Inside, her grandmother, Mrs. Wynn, lay in a recliner most days, half awake, half remembering things that had happened 20 years ago. The fridge hummed louder than her voice. Dinner was always the same: canned soup or frozen waffles. Nora didn't complain. She never did. That's how life worked. You survive it. You don't question it. There were no pictures of her parents in the house. No stories. Just silence and the hum of things slowly breaking down. But Nora knew there were things the silence didn't say. There were records in a dusty box in the basement. Old documents with 2 names on them. 2 birth certificates. 2 identical footprints. She found them when she was 11 and never asked about it. Because deep down, she already knew. Her name was Nora Wynn, but she was born with a twin. The other girl's name was Mara. No one in town had ever heard that name. Nora never spoke it aloud, but sometimes when the house was too quiet and the ceiling fan made that soft ticking sound, she would open the cracked locket. One side held her school photo. The other side, a faded picture of the same face, but with eyes just slightly sharper, a grin with more teeth. Mara was real, and Mara was somewhere. Ilse, when they were little, Mara had been different, wild, unpredictable, dangerous even. By the time they were 10, Nora remembered being led away while men in white jackets took Mara somewhere safe. That was the word they used. Safe. Nora never saw her again, not in person anyway. But every few months, she'd get a letter, a drawing, Sometimes she'd even sneak out to visit. They didn't let Mara talk to many people, but they let Nora in, just once or twice a year. Last time she visited, Mara didn't speak. She just stared at her, unblinking, like she was looking through her skin and into her thoughts. Nora left shaking. That night, she cried harder than she had in years. Not because Mara scared her, but because she was the only one who looked at her, like she wasn't invisible. School the next day was the same. Another video, another shove, another cruel note stuffed into her locker, folded like origami and soaked in spite. But something in her shifted. She went home, took off the cardigan, and stared at herself in the mirror, long cold. She opened the locket again, not like before, not to remember. This time to decide. And somewhere just a few miles away, Mara's eyes snapped open because Nora had finally reached her limit. And while Nora faded into the background, someone else, just a few miles away, had been waiting for the day she'd be needed. The other sister. The Wheatley Residential Treatment Center didn't look like much from the outside. Just brick walls, chain-link fences, and a row of blacked-out windows that never opened. It sat just across the county line, far enough that no one asked questions, close enough that secrets could still breathe. Inside room 12B, Mara Wynne hadn't spoken in 7 years. Not a word, not a whisper, not even a scream on the nights she woke up gasping. She didn't need to talk. She had her drawings. Stacks of paper lined her window ledge, her bed, and her floor. Hundreds of faces, some familiar, some not. Students, teachers, hallways, cafeterias, all are perfectly rendered in black graphite, and always with one thing in common: fear. Every drawing looked like a memory of something that hadn't happened yet. The nurses stopped asking about them. They labeled her non-verbal, but highly visual. One doctor called her a savant, another said she was dangerous, but most just said she was a lost cause. She wasn't. Because every time Nora visited, Mara's hands moved faster. She didn't smile. She didn't hug her, but she listened. Every story, every detail about the school, those girls, that hallway, about Addison Reed and her whispers, about the cracked locket and the bruises that never healed quite right. Mara would stare at her twin like a mirror she could no longer touch. Until one Saturday afternoon in late October, when something shifted. Nora sat beside her like always, the locket resting in her palm. Mara watched her eyes. They were dull, tired, empty, and then Nora did something she'd never done. She opened the locket, held it out, let Mara look. Mara reached out with a single finger, tapped the photo on her side. Her eyes locked onto Nora's and stayed there, and that moment, that was the decision. No words, no plan, just a knowing. That night the drawing changed. Mara tore every old page off her wall, replaced them with new ones, faces she didn't hate, a layout of the school, lockers, exits, class schedules. Then there is one final sketch right in the center. 2 girls, one is standing behind the other, one holding a black locket, one with red eyes. The staff thought it was just more of her usual routine, but they didn't notice she'd stopped needing her medication. Didn't notice she'd stopped rocking in place. They didn't see the glint in her eyes return. They didn't know she was counting down. Meanwhile, back in Wheatley, Nora was quiet again. But not in the usual way. She was preparing. Every move was careful. She started wearing clothes that fit a little tighter, stood in the mirror a little longer, practiced walking like someone who wasn't afraid, like someone who watched instead of avoided. She went back to school the next day, but something was different. She didn't speak in class. She didn't eat at lunch. And when Addison pushed past her in the hall, muttering, "Move, freak," Nora didn't flinch. She just stared. That night she packed a bag, clothes, ID, a hoodie, the locket. At exactly 4:11 a.m., she walked out the front door and left a note on the table beside her grandmother's pillowcase. It simply read, "Don't worry, you won't lose me. You'll just see more of me than ever." By sunrise, Room 12B at the treatment center was empty, but the bed was made. The drawing of the red-eyed girl was gone, and the nurse who opened the door swore she felt someone watching her, even though the room was quiet. Later that morning, the school bus pulled up to Wheatley High like it always did. But this time, when Nora stepped off, her shoulders weren't slumped. She didn't avoid eye contact. She didn't shuffle to the back. She walked straight down the hall like it belonged to her, like it was hers to burn. Addison saw her and froze. The same girl, same face. But something was off. Too calm, too still. And those eyes? They weren't just red from crying. They glowed. Mara had entered the building, and no one, not the school, not the staff, not even Addison herself, was ready for what came next. They thought Nora had just gained confidence. The bullies thought. She finally snapped. But they were all wrong. That wasn't Nora anymore. The swap. The first thing people noticed that Monday morning was her silence. But not the usual kind. It wasn't the hunched, shrinking silence they were used to from Nora Wynne. This silence had weight. It entered the building like a thundercloud. Low, still pressing against everyone's skin. She walked in without flinching. Past the front office, down the main hallway, past the wall of student photos where her face had never appeared. Same hair, same frame, same cracked locket. But the way she moved, unrecognizable. Teachers paused. Students stared. Even the janitor stepped back slightly as she brushed past him, not looking up. She didn't need to, because she already knew where everyone was, because this wasn't Nora Wynne. This was Mara, wearing her sister's skin-like armor. Her steps were measured, eyes calm, but unblinking. She didn't smile, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge a single soul until she passed Addison Reed and her crew near the vending machines. Addison laughed under her breath, loud enough for effect. Oh, look. The ghost finally crawled out of her grave. Mara stopped, not fully, just a slight pause. Like a system glitching, she turned her head slowly, looked directly at Addison. Not with anger, not with fear, just with knowledge. And then she walked away, no reply, no snark, no visible reaction. But Addison's laughter stalled halfway through. The rest of the girls looked at her, confused. What was that? One whispered. She didn't even blink, another muttered. Did you see her eyes? By the third period, whispers were everywhere. Nora looks different. Is she okay? She's walking like she owns the place. Mara didn't answer the roll call. She just raised her hand when the teacher said, "Win." That was enough. In history, she stared directly at Mr. Camden while he lectured about civil unrest. He skipped over her when asking questions, but she kept her gaze locked on him like a challenge. At lunch, she sat alone by choice, but she didn't stare at her food this time. She watched. 3 tables over, Addison was showing off a new designer bracelet to her friends, bragging about how her mom gets them imported. Mara tilted her head. She didn't care about the bracelet. She cared about the phone. It sat face up next to Addison's smoothie, unlocked. Mara stood up, quiet, smooth. She walked toward the trash can beside Addison's table and accidentally bumped the corner. The phone slid. Mara caught it mid-air like she'd done it 100 times. Addison turned just in time to see Mara looking at the screen. Too long. Long enough. Addison jumped up, snatching it back. "Watch it, freak." Mara didn't flinch. She looked at Addison. One more time, then turned and walked away. But what did she see on that screen? Changed everything. It wasn't just a selfie gallery. It was a photo album titled MW. And the first photo, a picture of Mara, is drawn in graphite. Same one from her. Old room, same face, same smirk. Addison had been watching her for years. Somehow she knew. Mara didn't show it on her face. But her stomach tightened. The game wasn't about school anymore. This was about blood. That night, Mara locked herself in Nora's room. She opened a notebook. plain red, brand new. She started a list. Addison Reedams, Prescott, Coach Lane, Principal Holbrook, Smilecam. Account owner, hall monitor room, 3B names, roles, patterns. She began mapping the way they operated. Who gave Addison cover? Who laughed along? Who filmed? Who looked away? She wrote 2 more names at the bottom, MWVC, then she drew a question mark between them. She clipped a photo of the locket to the page and underlined one word, air, across town. In a dark kitchen, Addison scrolled through her phone nervously. That picture of Nora had always unsettled her, something about the eyes. It wasn't fear, it was something colder. She clicked the album open again, stared at the sketches she'd stolen. All those years ago, all those drawings from that locked box her mother once kept in the attic, the ones with the initials MW on the back. Addison thought she'd buried this, but the ghost, she didn't stay dead. The next morning, Nora returned to school wearing black jeans, boots, and a crimson sweater. For the first time in 4 years, she didn't wear the cardigan. She didn't need to. The hallway parted as she walked through. Even the teachers looked away. One girl said she smiled, another said she saw her talking to the principal. But no one could prove anything, except one boy swore he saw her leave the bathroom carrying a phone she hadn't gone in with. And at lunch, Addison's Instagram story was suddenly wiped clean. Every photo, every tag, gone. By 3:00 p.m., the account was deactivated. By 3:05 p.m., Mara had added a new name to her notebook, Addison Reed, compromised. And just like that, the revenge had begun. That photo wasn't just creepy, it was a clue to a secret. Deeper than anyone in this school could imagine, a lockbox of lies. Mara had always known something wasn't right with their story. The pieces didn't add up. Nora's silence. Their grandmother panicked when certain names came up. The way the locket was always hidden under layers, never talked about, never even opened in front of anyone. But that photo on Addison's phone? The drawing she shouldn't have. That tore the whole lie wide open. After school, Mara didn't go home right away. She walked through neighborhoods she barely remembered, past rows of rusted mailboxes and cornfields stretched out like they'd never end. She wasn't looking for fresh air. She was walking off the rage. Because someone had known about her. Someone had watched her, documented her. And if Addison had that sketch, it had to come from one place. The attic. That night, after the house went quiet and Nora's grandmother took her sleeping pills, Mara crept up the creaky stairs. She knew where the lockbox was. She had seen it when she was little, shoved behind old Christmas decorations and a broken typewriter. It was still there, dusty, heavy, covered in layers of cobwebs and family secrets. The key was long gone, but Mara didn't need one. She found a rusted screwdriver, wedged it beneath the clasp, and pried until the metal screamed open. Inside, answers, dozens of letters, legal documents, photos. One envelope had a wax seal and a monogram. VC. Mara's breath hitched. She pulled it open. Inside was a letter, dated 17 years ago, written to her grandmother, to Mrs. Wynne. I'm writing once more regarding the child. I've wired the last payment to your account. Per our agreement, she never knows the truth. Nora will remain under your care. Mara is to be removed from all records. I cannot jeopardize the family name. I trust this closes our arrangement. Vincent Caldwell. Vincent Caldwell. The name hit her like a punch. Everyone in Wheatley knew that name. Caldwell Industries funded the town's library, the school gym, the science wing. His face was framed in the high school lobby, smiling in a plaque photo beside the words, "A proud son of Wheatley." He was dead now. Car crash in Chicago. But that didn't change what Mara was holding. He was her father, her real father, and he'd erased her, labeled her unstable, dangerous, unworthy. He paid to keep her away and left Nora to be raised in silence. Mara's hands shook, but she kept digging. Beneath the letters, she found a folded photo, a woman in a maid's uniform holding two babies. One baby stared at the camera, calm. The other, Mara, had a fist clenched. Around the maid's gold necklace, on the back, written in faded ink, Elena Reed, age 22, Caldwell Estate. Nursery wing, Reed, as in Addison Reed. Mara's eyes widened. Addison's mother had been the maid, the one who held them, the one who knew. And if she knew she was part of the arrangement, that meant Addison's cruelty wasn't random. It was rehearsed. It was generational. It was protected. Mara stared down at the photo and the letter, the locket clutched in her hand. This wasn't about school anymore. This was about legacy. This was about erasure. They'd taken her name, her family, her story, and replaced her with a quiet version of herself. But they forgot one thing. Mara didn't stay erased. She flipped open her red notebook and wrote 3 new entries. Vincent Caldwell, biological father. Deceased Elena Reed, co-conspirator Addison Reed, heir to the lie. Then she tore out a blank page and sketched the photo, both babies. But this time, the baby labeled Mara had red eyes, glowing. She tucked the sketch under her pillow. The next day at school, Mara was a storm cloud wrapped in skin. In chemistry, she purposely dropped her pencil by Addison's chair. When she bent down to pick it up, she slipped a thumb drive into Addison's open tote bag. No one noticed. At 12:03 p.m., all the school printers erupted at once. Students screamed as page after page spilt out. Copies of the letter, the photo, the payment records, the Caldwell monogram. The hallways froze. Mara stood near the vending machine, watching as Addison spun in circles, grabbing pages, trying to shred them before too many hands saw. But it was too late. One of the juniors had already posted it online. The caption read, "The Reed family owns lies, not legacies." Addison was called to the office, but Mara didn't follow. She had another appointment to keep. She walked straight into the library and asked the stunned assistant librarian if the Caldwell donation plaque could be removed. The librarian blinked. Why? Mara just stared at her, and for a brief moment the woman nodded, like somewhere deep down. She knew. By the end of the day, the plaque had vanished. The photos were scrubbed. The whispers turned to roars. And Addison? Suspended. Not because she broke the rules, but because the rules were no longer written in her family's favor. Mara closed her notebook that night with a smile. But she wasn't done. Because this wasn't revenge yet. This was just the start. Mara came to settle a score. But now, she had a reason to burn the whole system down. The red notebook by now, no one at Wheatley High dared call her Nora to her face. They didn't know why. They couldn't explain it. But something about the way she stared straight through people, like glass, made even the worst bullies shut up mid-laugh. Even the teachers acted differently around her. They marked her present, without calling her name. They avoided eye contact when passing her in the halls. One even took a sick day after a tense moment during class when she answered a question he hadn't even asked yet. Mara noticed all of it, and she wrote it all down in her red notebook. It wasn't a diary, it wasn't some secret journal of feelings. It was a blueprint. Page 1 was a floor map of Wheatley High. Every door, every camera, every blind spot. Page 2 listed every student who had ever posted a video mocking her sister. Beside each name, she drew small symbols, for passwords hacked, for messages intercepted, and for lives ready to be detonated. Page 3, the teachers, the ones who laughed along, the ones who gave Addison special treatment, the ones who didn't see anything, while Nora suffered in silence. And at the very top of that list, Principal Holbrook, the man who once told Nora to toughen up. He had no idea he'd signed his own name onto a target. Mara spent every lunch period in the library now, back corner, headphones in, notebook open. But she wasn't listening to music. She was recording voices, conversations near the staff lounge, whispered rumors, audio logs from class lectures. Every detail mattered, and when she wasn't collecting intel, she was building the second part of her plan, the extraction. She didn't just want the truth to come out. She wanted it to sting. One by one, she tested her reach. First, Coach Lane. She left a copy of an email chain, one that showed he altered a student's GPA for a favor, in his faculty mailbox. The next morning, he turned in his resignation without a word. Second, Miss Prescott. She discovered the math teacher had been selling answers to SAT prep questions for cash. A screenshot made its way into the student group chat. Prescott's desk was empty the next week. The students didn't know who was behind it. They just knew someone was cleaning the house. They called it the ghost. Some swore Nora had finally snapped. Others thought she'd made a deal with someone darker, but no one could prove anything, because Mara never left fingerprints, just fear. The only person who suspected anything was Addison. After her suspension, she returned quieter, shaken, less makeup, no entourage. She sat alone at lunch now, picking at her food, eyes darting toward corners as if she could feel Mara's gaze from across the cafeteria. She wasn't wrong. Mara was watching her. Because Addison had more to lose than anyone, and Mara knew the biggest. It hadn't landed yet. Addison's mother, Elena Reed, had gone underground. No interviews, no statements. But Mara had found her address, not far, just 3 towns over. A quiet house with security cameras, a locked mailbox and thick curtains. Mara didn't need to knock, she just needed time. Because there was one more piece left in the lockbox from the attic, a sealed envelope, one that hadn't been opened in 17 years. It had no return address, just her name, Mara Wynne. Inside, there was a letter. If you're reading this, then the lie didn't hold. I'm sorry. I did what I thought would protect you both. But one of you had to disappear. Please don't hate her. Your sister wasn't the reason. It was me. You were strong enough to remember. Nora was only strong enough to forget. Forgive me, Grandma. Mara didn't cry. She just folded the letter neatly and placed it on the final page of the notebook. Then she underlined a name, Wynne, not Caldwell. Not Reed, her name, her legacy, and now her justice, because the school might have erased her once, but now she held the pen because the past doesn't stay buried, and some truths claw their way back with blood on their fingers. The DNA file, the thing about secrets is that they don't stay secrets forever, especially not in small towns like Wheatley. All it took was one slip-up, one concerned counselor, one flagged report labeled sudden personality change and potential trauma masking. That's when the file was pulled, the real file, not the one the school had on record for Nora Wynne, the shy girl with a low GPA and no disciplinary history. This was the one buried deep in a child welfare archive under an old case ID. It had both. Their names on it, Nora Wynne, Mara Wynne. Twins, born minutes apart, registered together, then split, and under custodial transfer, a signature, Vincent Caldwell. When the district office reviewed the records, they didn't know what they were looking at, so they sent it up. First to the principal, then to the superintendent. By the time it hit the state database, someone had flagged a match between Nora's medical file and an old DNA sample from an anonymous hospital donor, Vincent Caldwell. It was him. Undeniable. A full paternal match. Not just for Nora, for Mara. The records confirmed it. Mara Wynne was the biological heir of Vincent Caldwell, not just some discarded child, not a mistake. She was blood. And everything the Caldwell name controlled, trusts, properties, investments, technically belonged to her. That's when the phone calls started. Wheatley High received an urgent notification from the Department of Family Affairs. But they were too late, because Mara already knew. She didn't need a government letter to tell her who she was. She'd figured it out the moment she read the word payment in that letter from the attic. Still, the confirmation hit differently, because now it wasn't just a suspicion, it was proof, and proof, that's power. She sat in the back of the library that afternoon, reading the digital files she hacked through a staff login she'd lifted from a teacher's sticky note. Everything was there: birth records, blood types, test results, adoption transfers, custody redactions. But it was one file in particular that made her freeze. Intake report. Mara Wynne, age 10. Patient displays high cognitive function, pattern recognition, and dissociative traits. The subject was deemed unstable following severe emotional disturbance after separation from their twin. The decision was made to isolate one twin to preserve the mental development of the other. Recommended removal to secure. Facility risk to the reputation of Caldwell family noted. Risk to reputation. That's all she had ever been, a PR problem, a scandal wrapped in skin. And Nora, she'd been the decoy, the soft one, the silent one, the one who didn't fight back. Mara felt her chest tighten, not with sadness, but with something else. Resolve. She stared at the locket in her palm. It had never belonged to Nora, not really. It was given by a man who abandoned them both. To the twin he thought could be hidden. Mara clicked the final folder and found something she hadn't expected. An audio file, a voicemail, left by Vincent Caldwell 2 weeks before his death. "I've made arrangements. If this ever resurfaces, they'll come looking for her, but only one of them is mine. You understand what needs to be done. Tell Addison's mother to clean it up, or we both lose everything." It ended with static. Mara played it 3 times, and each time the words twisted deeper into, "Heard that only one of them is mine, so even in death, he was still choosing, still dividing them, still erasing her." Mara closed the laptop and slid it back into her bag. Then she opened her red notebook to a fresh page and wrote in all caps, "Clean it up," he said. "Let's start with that." The next morning, an envelope was slid under Principal Holbrook's door. Inside, a printout of the voicemail transcript, a thumb drive with the recording, and a note. "Keep protecting Addison, and this goes public." He resigned 2 hours later. Mara didn't smile. She just crossed his name off the list. Later that day, someone asked her if she'd heard about the school district being audited. She shrugged. Because that wasn't the goal. The goal was never just punishment. A goal was a replacement. They'd taken her name, her father, her voice. Now she was taking it all back, one file at a time. The final blow was coming, not with fists, but with footage, facts, and fire. Downfall Day. It started with a USB drive. Not a bomb, not a scream, just a tiny piece of plastic no bigger than a stick of gum. But what did it hold? It was enough to burn down every lie Wheatley High had ever protected. Mara didn't say a word that morning. She just walked into the auditorium early, before the student body filed in for the mandatory Founders' Day assembly, a tribute to the school's legacy and, more importantly, to the Caldwell family who funded it. The plaque with Vincent Caldwell's name was still gone. No one ever asked why. She walked up the side steps of the stage, plugged the USB into the podium's media station, and cued a file labeled WH Reality Final v3.mp4. She didn't look back. She didn't check if anyone saw. She just hit sync, tucked her notebook under her arm, and left the room before anyone entered. By 10:03 a.m., the auditorium was packed. Principal Holbrook's seat was empty. His resignation had been announced without ceremony. Addison sat near the front, eyes still guarded, hair tied back like she was trying to disappear. The lights dimmed and then the screen lit up. At first, everyone expected a video about Wheatley's history, maybe a tribute to the gym or a slideshow of smiling students. What they got was something else entirely. The screen opened with silence, then a black screen. The text, white on black, some stories are erased to protect the wrong people, and then footage, clips of Nora being tripped in the cafeteria, screenshots of group chats mocking her appearance, emails showing grade changes, a scan of Vincent Caldwell's letter. The maid's photo holding twin infants, Addison's mother, is clear as day. Financial record, $100,000 was transferred to Elena Reed's bank account the same week Mara was institutionalized. The audio. Only one of them is mine. You understand what needs to be done. Clean it up. Addison's gasp echoed through the room like a gunshot. The video didn't just expose her, it connected her mother. Her power, her protection, all rooted in Mara's stolen bloodline. By the time the footage ended, the entire auditorium was frozen. No claps, no coughs, no movement, only a single blinking cursor on the blank screen. Then, one final message appeared. You called her a ghost, but ghosts don't forget. A moment later, the fire alarm went off. No fire, no smoke, just chaos. Mara had timed it perfectly. She stood just outside the auditorium, watching as students poured out. Some crying, some whispering, some silent in shock. Addison didn't come out right away. When she finally did, her face was pale, her eyes hollow. She looked like someone who had seen herself reflected in something too honest. The red notebook was already trending online. Photos of its pages had leaked. Every name, every symbol, every note. Students took screenshots. Teachers denied everything. The district launched an investigation before lunch. By afternoon, Addison was gone. Her locker was cleared. Her name was wiped from the school website. A local blog reported she'd withdrawn due to emotional distress. But those who saw the video knew better. She wasn't the victim. She was the final piece, the toppling queen in Mara's long, careful game. That evening, Mara returned to the stage alone. The auditorium was empty and quiet, exactly how she liked it. She walked to the podium and pulled out one last thing, the cracked black locket. She snapped it open. Inside were two faces, hers and Nora's. She reached into her bag, pulled out a blade, and scratched Nora's photo clean. Not out of hatred, not out of jealousy, out of necessity, because this version of Nora didn't exist anymore. Only one twin remained, and the world needed to see her clearly. She left the locket on the podium, a message, a monument. When a janitor found it the next morning, he swore the metal was warm, like it had just been held. The students came back to school 2 days later, but it didn't feel the same. Some said it felt haunted. Others said it felt honest. Finally. Whispers floated through the halls like dust in sunlight about the girl who wasn't Nora, about the video, about how the system bent around the rich until someone made it snap. One girl even claimed the video changed her life. She started her own notebook, this one full of names she wanted to protect. Because ghosts weren't the only ones who remembered. Sometimes survivors do too, and just like that, she vanished. But the story? Far from over, the vanishing after the fire alarm, after the video, after Addison Reed disappeared like her reputation had swallowed her whole. Mara Wynne was nowhere to be found, not in the library, not at her locker, not even in the school's database. It was like she had blinked out of existence the moment her revenge went viral. And yet, the girl calling herself Nora came back the very next week. The cardigan was back. The silence returned. Head down, shoulders low, walking carefully through the halls as the weight had returned to her bones. Everyone assumed she was traumatized by the event. Maybe she wasn't the mastermind after all. She barely made eye contact, barely spoke. A few teachers approached gently, asking if she needed anything. She nodded quietly, said she was okay now. But something didn't quite fit. Because this version of Nora didn't flinch when doors slammed, didn't shake when laughter echoed down the hallway, and once, just once, someone saw her crack. Her knuckles in perfect sync with the class bell, like she'd been waiting. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some students whispered that Mara had taken over permanently. Others swore Nora had returned, but wasn't alone inside her own mind. The most popular theory: they'd switched places for good, not just identities, not just names, but lives. The cafeteria fell quiet when she entered, not because they pitied her, but because no one could tell what she might do next. Fear and fascination kept her insulated. Old bullies either avoided her completely or overcompensated with awkward kindness. One even left a handwritten apology note in her locker. She tore it in half without reading it, but she didn't retaliate. She didn't need to, because her work was done, or so everyone thought. 2 weeks later, in the girls' bathroom on the East Wing, the one near the broken vending machine, someone found something strange. Red beads scattered across the sink, not a necklace. It's not a bracelet, just 7 small, smooth beads, and in the mirror, written in something like lipstick, but thicker, was one word: erased. The custodian scrubbed it clean by noon, but the whispers had already begun again. That night, Addison's name trended again, not for something she did, but for something someone found: a photo, undated, posted anonymously. It showed Addison crying in a hotel room, red beads in her hand, staring at a cracked photo frame with the Caldwell monogram. The caption read, "Some ghosts haunt you while they're still alive." No one could trace the account. No one claimed credit. But back at school, Nora had started wearing a new necklace, thin gold chain, empty charm, like something had been removed, or was it never meant to be filled? Only the janitor noticed that her locker, previously untouched for months, now had a small tag taped inside. It read, "Red Book closed for now." By the end of the semester, the school was quieter. No more viral videos. No more hallway humiliations, no more readers, but in every classroom a red notebook sat on a shelf. Not the original, but replicas empty, waiting, because the lesson is stuck. Someone was always watching. And justice didn't always come from courts or cops. Sometimes it came from girls who disappeared and came back with sharper eyes. The final mystery? No one ever confirmed if Nora had really returned or if Mara had buried her like a ghost. They thought they buried the past. But what do you do when the past starts writing back? The face that watched it. Burn Spring came late to Wheatley that year. The lake behind the school, usually frozen until March, had already thawed by February. The snow melted into mud, and the air hung heavy with the kind of silence only a scorched place knows. After the noise, after the fire, after the fall, no one spoke of what had happened anymore. Not officially. The assembly was never mentioned again. The Caldwell plaque was never replaced. Addison Reed's name was wiped from every honor roll, from every archived email, from every whispered hallway legacy. She had become what she feared most, forgotten. But across the lake, on a splintered dock, near the edge of the woods, a girl sat cross-legged with her back to the school, wearing the same cardigan, same shoes, same quiet. It looked like Nora, but then she tilted her head, and the sunlight caught her eyes, just enough to show they weren't empty. They were watching. Her grandmother sat nearby, bundled in an old coat, flipping through a faded newspaper, unaware that the girl beside her wasn't just reading the ripples in the water. She was remembering every piece of what she'd taken back. The notebook was gone. The USB drive was destroyed. The locket? Buried. She'd taken it to the same place where they'd hidden her name for all those years, the woods behind the old maintenance shed. She dug a hole, not to forget, but to seal it. Not to erase the past, but to end its reach. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was closure. She didn't need the photo anymore. She didn't need the locket, the notebook, the files, because she'd become the story now. The school had changed. People were kinder, quieter, more careful. Whether out of guilt or fear, she didn't know, didn't care. She hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks, and yet she never felt more heard. One teacher, Mrs. Bright, the literature sub, tried to reach her. She slipped a book into her locker one day. Jane Eyre. Inside, a sticky note. Justice is not for the loud. It belongs to the ones who wait. She kept the book, never read it, but it felt understood. As the sun dipped lower, her grandmother turned to her. "You've been so quiet lately," she said, voice thin and warm. "Is it all behind you now?" The girl paused, then nodded slowly, but as she looked back across the lake, her eyes didn't reflect the school. They reflected flame, the version of her that once cried in locker rooms, once bled behind dumpsters, once begged herself to disappear. That version was gone. What was left wasn't Nora, not fully, and not Mara. What was left was something built from both, a girl made of silence and fire, of erasure and return, of locket halves and broken truths. She whispered, maybe to herself, maybe to no one at all. Some girls break, others break. The world back. A breeze rustled through the trees, and behind her the school stood still in the reflection of the lake, not burning, but never the same. Elsewhere in Indiana, another school gets a new transfer student. She's quiet, keeps to herself, but someone sees her drawing names in a red notebook, and her eyes, they don't look new, they look familiar. And just like that, the girl they called weak vanished into history. But legends, they don't disappear. They evolve. They linger. They return when the world needs reminding that silence is not surrender, and some ghosts don't haunt. They rebuild. If this story pulled at something inside you, if it made you remember a time you were underestimated, then hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. Tell us, what would you do if you had 1 week to walk in your twins' shoes with nothing left to lose? The best comment will be pinned, because your voice deserves to be heard. And who knows, maybe the next chapter it will be yours.